and welcome to the Smarter Food Supply Chain webinar series. I'm Mike Ellen and I serve AIM as their Member Engagement Manager. AIM North America is an alliance enabling the cooperation, development, standardization of AIDC technologies. From barcodes to RFID to IoT, AIM North America is your advocate. Any organization with an interest in data collection is a beneficiary of these efforts. Membership provides an opportunity to influence the direction of the industry, develop policies and standards, access market reports, and engage new partners. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items I would like to go over. On this slide, you see our antitrust policy. It's the policy of AIM Inc. to conduct its operations in strict compliance with the antitrust laws. No AIM activity shall create even the appearance of a violation of the letter or spirit of the antitrust laws. And our collaboration and work product policy states that committee meetings and presentations are held for the primary purpose of advancements in our industry, which necessarily involves development of work product intended solely for the public domain. AIM's developed this policy for the protection of its members who engage in this important collaborative effort. And some housekeeping notes before we get started. You'll notice that you are muted throughout the presentation. This presentation will be recorded and you will be notified via email when the recording is available. If you have any questions you would like answered by Elizabeth, please send those to the AIM via the chat dialog box located on the bottom right of your screen. We'll answer as many questions as possible at the conclusion of the presentation. Also, if we do not get to your question, when I send out that email, we will have an option for you to send those questions over to Elizabeth and she can answer those via email. So with that, Elizabeth, take it away.
Hi, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Sinclair, and I'm Director of Marketing for BarTender labeling, barcode, and RFID software. I'm really happy to be with you today, but because my company's headquarters is based in the Seattle area, my colleagues and I have been working from home for the last 3 weeks. So in advance, I apologize for any household-related ambient or background noise during my presentation. I was the startup chair of AIM's Track and Trace Committee, and that remains one of the things that I'm most proud of during the course of my career. AIM works super hard to enable global food safety and its inherent consumer protection. I'm very, very grateful that I can be part of that. Today, we're going to talk about food safety culture, why food safety culture is important, and how to foster food safety culture in your business. Auto ID, that's scanners, printers, verifiers, encoders, software, hardware, plays a crucial role in creating and maintaining a safe and transparent global food supply chain. And we're going to talk about that too. When we talk about food safety culture, we're talking about the entire supply chain, from fishery, farm and ranch, producer and processor, manufacturer, logistics provider, cold storage warehouse, wholesaler, to grocery, deli, and food service, every single node of the supply chain. And we're also, most importantly, talking about everyone that works in the food supply chain, because that's where the responsibility for food safety culture lies, with everyone. I'd also like to note that we could build a full 60-minute presentation on any one of the slides you're going to see today. But our goal is to have a quick, high-level 20-minute session. So if you want to know more about any of the topics, please get in touch with me. My email's on the last slide. And I'm geeky about this stuff, so I'm always happy to chat about it. So what is food safety culture? First, let's talk about what food safety culture isn't. It used to be that food safety was considered a simple quality assurance issue only, relegated to just a couple people at a company, sometimes from the regulatory team, sometimes from the operations team. And those few people carried the standard for food safety throughout the organization, and these organizations were often resistant. Food safety culture was seen in many cases as a hindrance to doing one's work. But then a few things happened. The 2011 Food Safety Modernization Act in the US, and when we talk about that in subsequent slides, we're going to call it FSMA for FSMA, was enacted in the US. It's been a catalyst for a new way to think about food safety. Between 2011 and today, we've seen a sea change in how the food supply chain engages with food safety. And we can see that by this new emphasis on food safety culture. So, a food safety culture refers to the values of an organization or facility, its practices and values in regard to food safety. I've heard that food safety culture is how an organization behaves when no one is watching. In an organization with a strong food safety culture, everyone is responsible for food safety, and it's a primary driver for behavior instead of being relegated to compliance enablement only. A strong food safety culture permeates an organization, with food safety always top of mind for everyone. The standards organization GFSI says there are specific things to look for when assessing your company's food safety value. These things provide a plumb line of sorts for organizations throughout the supply chain, a means by which they can engage their food safety culture. In measuring a food safety culture, GFI suggests we should consider, where does food safety rate in corporate decision making? Is it primary or not significant at all? Are food safety decisions risk-based, profit-based, reputation-based, consumer-centric, or more, hang on just a second, I'm having little computer issues. Okay, or more appropriately seen as standard business procedure? How do people demonstrate food safety ownership? Is ownership evident in the ways they do their work? Is food safety messaging accepted and embraced? Is there evidence of unconscious competence, meaning where food safety practices appear to be second nature and do not require a lot of active thought? Are there indications of success or failure in food safety initiatives? Are good behaviors in food safety reinforced and recognized? Conversely, are there consequences and accountability for bad behaviors? Is food safety measured frequently? Is messaging changed frequently internally to keep it fresh? How do your senior leaders engage with food safety? How is your messaging used to communicate food safety expectations to all employees? And is your company's vision and mission clearly expressed so that both are understood by all staff? So FSMA moved us from the world of HACCP, which is hazard analysis and critical control points, which, because I'm a nerd, it's interesting to me that HACCP was created in the 1960s by Pillsbury and NASA as they teamed up to develop good manufacturing protocols so they could feed astronauts in space safely and reliably. So that's really one of the foundational, the American space program, the Gemini space program was one of the first drivers in the US for food safety protocols. Now we've moved away from HACCP to HARPC, which is hazard analysis and risk-based preventive controls, and you don't have to remember that. But the focus in the US food supply chain has moved from backwards facing problem fixing to forward-looking risk mitigation. And over the years, we've experienced some high-profile foodborne illness incidents that have moved food safety to the forefront of consumer awareness. So for example, Great Britain dealt with mad cow disease. In the US, over 700 people were sickened with E. coli, which had permeated the Jack in the Box supply chain. And by the way, if you want to see a best practices example of what to do after a food safety crisis, study up on Jack in the Box's response. We should all feel very safe eating there today. They just had an impeccable response to fixing this problem. More recently, executives at the Peanut Corporation of America served jail time for a deadly salmonella outbreak. And there was E. coli at Chipotle stores a few years ago, as you may remember. I remember specifically because my company, Seagull Scientific, had our Halloween party catered by one of the Chipotle stores that was an E. coli source and closed just a few days after Halloween. So it's personal. And I think food safety is personal for most of us. These incidents coincide with the growth of technological capabilities that allow the consumer to stay connected to the information that they care about. Consumers want to know the provenance of the food they feed their families. They want to know that the irrigation source for the romaine lettuce they buy isn't near a cattle farm, that the ingredients in packaged goods are sourced from reputable vendors and wholesome. And those consumers now carry tiny, powerful computers in their pockets and purses. Cell phones mean that much of this information is available at an instant. AIM members are deeply embedded in the drive for food safety across the global supply chain. We provide temperature sensors on pallets and in trucks, RFID chips that can track an item's location, NFC for enhanced traceability and transparency. Visit the AIM website, you'll learn more. Today, we're going to talk about 3 of the building blocks of consumer food safety that are enabled by Auto ID. We're going to talk about traceability, date coding, and allergen identification. The food supply chain is so vast and so complex and increasingly so global that regulatory agencies and industry organizations have a hard time keeping up with what happens between the ranch, fishery, farm, or processing plant to your table. As you know, global regulatory bodies are addressing food safety with traceability regulations because if you can provide visibility to the supply chain and understand a product's journey, beginning where it was grown or manufactured and ending when it lands on the consumer's table, you've enabled the agility required for a quick response to food safety incidents. The food sector is a fragmented system. It's a few large entities, but mostly small to mid-sized producers, transporters, manufacturers, and outlets, which means one of the challenges here is finding a common language, a way for all members of a supply chain to track and record the same information in the same way. So, adherence to global standards and automation technology solutions are going to be necessary to enable compliance with these new global regulations. Current EU and US track and trace regulations require that any company that handles, produces, or processes food be able to track every ingredient back 1 node downstream in the supply chain and every product that leaves their facility 1 node upstream. And in the case of a regulatory mock recall audit or an actual recall, they're required to be able to produce those data within 24 hours. This 24-hour time window for 1 up, 1 down traceability provides a powerful incentive for the transition from manual to automated supply chain tracking processes and on-demand labeling. If the food supply chain were binary, 1 ingredient into each product advancing to the same upstream node, the 24-hour window would be pretty easy to achieve. But the food supply chain isn't binary, and that's a challenge. The next stop for a single lot of pollock fished out of the Gulf of Alaska could be a variety of locations all over the world. It might end up as an ingredient in surimi and in pet food and in frozen fish sticks and in canned products processed in Asia, Europe, and North America. Another challenge FSMA presents to manual processes is its requirement that establishments keep records of all labeling. That record must include the final label as applied to the product formulation, an accounting of the product's processing procedures, and any supported documentation, meaning evidence that the labeling is in compliance with all applicable regulations. So this is going to require help from our member organizations and an interoperable, transparent supply chain. Okay, on-pack date coding is confusing. Sell by, best before, enjoy by, expires by. I've even seen born on. What guidance do these codes even provide? What do they mean? We're not the only ones that think that way. Fortunately, the Grocery Manufacturers Association and the Food Marketing Institute are trying to clear all this up. They've embarked on a voluntary common sense initiative for date coding on consumer packaged goods, reducing these date coding parameters to just 2. Best if used by, best if used or freeze by indicates that after the printed date, the food is still safe to eat, but it might not perform as expected. For example, the taste might have diminished a bit, or the vitamin content might be slightly depleted. The second phrase, use by or use or freeze by, means that a product should be consumed by the date listed on the package. Perishable products with potential safety implications or significant nutritional degradation after a certain time period, like milk, for example, are marked with this phrase. An additional benefit to these two more clear designations is that we expect a reduction in food waste when date coding is clear and concise. So consumers can better understand when an item is safe and when it needs to be thrown away, instead of following the current folklore guidance of when in doubt, throw it out. On-pack date coding can be implemented in several ways. Meats, for example, usually feature stickers from a thermal transfer printer. Fruit and vegetable clamshells and other packaged goods often have their date coding marked on the package itself. In either case, the label or mark comes from software that's connected to a database. The labeling and marketing software calculates the best if used by and use or freeze by dates by applying business logic to the information it pulls from the database. For example, that business logic might be programmed to add 10 days to the date an item was packaged and print that. Let's look at reportable food safety violations. So this very impressive pie chart comes from FDA's Reportable Food Registry Annual Report. And you'll notice that the incidents FDA considers serious enough threats to public health to record include foodborne illnesses like Salmonella, Listeria, E. coli, contamination by drugs or foreign object, and undeclared allergens. Of the primary incidents reported to FDA, undeclared allergens comprise the largest segment, approximately 1.5 times all the rest of the categories. And we should note that the EU statistics track parallel. They're very similar. Stephen Gendel, who is the former food allergen coordinator for FDA, has said that FSMA is the first time labeling has been considered a public health safety measure, along with sanitation and other controls. Before FSMA, labeling has traditionally been considered a means to convey information in the food supply chain. So for the food industry, this means information like ingredients, allergens, weight, supply chain management like tracking and tracing. But now, labeling is considered a key public health driver. When Jeff Canavan was Deputy Director of Labeling and Program Delivery of the USDA SIS, he said that the most common process mistakes that result in enforceable allergen labeling errors under FSMA stem from new ingredients, new suppliers, or product reformulation. Misprinted labels and product placed in wrong package account for a significant number of enforceable incidents. But the good news is he had recommendations for how companies can prevent undeclared allergens based on 3 principles. The first is identify. Labels and product formulations should always be cross-referenced with incoming ingredients and allergenic materials segregated into specific designated areas. The second preventative principle is prevent and control. Companies should use dedicated equipment for processing allergens. They should document cleaning procedures using checklists and maintain methods for tracking product. Note, this is another primary function of labeling processes in your business, supply chain tracking and tracing. And finally, the third recommended principle to protect against undeclared allergens is declare. Ensure that there are systems and checklists in place for determining labeling compliance, meaning declaration of all ingredients, on the final product, with defined procedures for handling any labeling discrepancies that are found. So what's in it for you? The consulting firm Deloitte estimates that in the US, Product recalls cost companies an average of $10 million per incident. And approximately 80% of small to mid-sized businesses fail within 3 years of a product recall. They attribute this to the loss of sales, reputation, and brand value. So if you're using manual processes, this might even mean Excel spreadsheets with keyboard data entry. They put an organization at risk. The more human input a system requires, the more opportunity for error is built into that system. If a company can't meet the 24-hour window to provide data in the case of a recall or mock audit, it's in serious trouble with regulators, and it's exposed to civil and perhaps even criminal action if someone gets sick. That is the very big stick here. But I'd like to offer you a carrot. You can extract tremendous value beyond regulatory compliance from a well-designed auto ID deployment. Traceability regulations afford the opportunity to evaluate and integrate existing processes, amplify existing efficiencies, and gain new ones. A well-deployed automation initiative provides the opportunity to standardize methodologies, examine and perhaps reorder master data, and implement a single source of truth strategy. Excuse me. You can create a leaner supply chain and save time, money, and resources. With well-curated, accurate, visible data, companies have done things like optimize accounting, transportation planning, inventory management. And the good news from my perspective is that the world's automation technology providers, my fellow AIM members, have already helped medical device and pharma manufacturers meet very similar global regulations. It's not our first rodeo, as we say. We've done this before, and we understand the promises and the pitfalls. So by now, you're persuaded to build a food safety culture. What do? The first thing is you get your executives on board. Food safety culture has to permeate the entire organization, but that starts at the very top. If your CEO is a sponsor of this important work, you will have a much easier time of it. Put together your team. Establish your own framework for working together. For some organizations, this will be the first time they've had a cross-functional team together. Make sure that you have input from all facets of your organization, because everyone will be impacted, and that helps ensure buy-in from all stakeholders and allows a project to reflect actual business needs. In other words, let your IT group participate in the decision-making, but don't let them drive the process. Let the business drive the project, and let IT be the resource that enables it. Your team is going to need members from the commercial side, from the ops side, from the exec offices, and from IT. And for some small companies, that's all going to be the same person. I understand. But company-wide buy-in is essential to a successful deployment. Create it by garnering input from all stakeholders. Talk with them early and often. Make plans for ongoing communications to your entire company about any food safety project, and especially at each milestone. So now you've got the right team, you've got a budget and a communication plan. So what's your system going to do? What's your goal for this food safety culture system? I know this seems obvious, but so many projects are initiated with no sense of direction, only a sense of need. So what you need to do here is start at the end. What's your goal? Work backwards. The goals for the project are going to change over time, and that's okay. But you need to have a set of measurable goals for your system before you start. And if you're having a hard time starting, and I know a lot of companies do because they don't have the internal expertise, this is a new thing for them, because it's a complex proposition. There is something to be said for bringing in a consultant early in on the process, maybe just to help you get started. They can help define processes, describe the limits of your project. From there, maybe you'll decide that you can do the rest on your own. But most importantly is make sure whatever you design, whatever initiatives you enact are scalable and can grow as your business grows. And so that's it for my presentation. Mike, were there any questions?
Yeah, we have time for just a couple questions here. And as I said before at the very beginning of the webinar, we will be sending out a post-webinar email. And if you have additional questions you'd like to have Elizabeth answer, you can send them right to me. I'll get that to Elizabeth and she can get into contact with you. So the first question we do have is, are there any new regulations or trends on the horizon?
Oh, that's pretty interesting. How do I say this? So, you know, we have been in a political and social climate that's been a little bit, or maybe a lot of it globally, anti-regulation over the last several years. The interesting thing about that is even people who are adamantly opposed to regulation on general principle, pretty much everybody thinks that food safety regulation is okay. And you know, we all eat and we want our families to stay safe. So people really do care about having a safe food supply chain. So with that in mind, I think there's some pretty powerful laws on the books right now. But I understand that you know, every year, every month throws a new wrinkle at food safety. The food supply chain, given current events, is a very interesting place right now. COVID-19 is having deep societal impacts, but the food supply chain, as it turns out, is the one sector that's growing and growing at quite a rapid rate as people hunker down and stay in their homes. Another trend that I would pose will influence this is social theorists call it I can't think of the name, but we want to be the thin interface. They call it the thin interface. So what that means is we want to be close to information. We want to know everything about everything around us. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and the joke is we even want to know the name of our chicken, right? So we're seeing a number of global initiatives through standards organizations like GS1 and retailers like Amazon who are moving to item level traceability and identification, so that no matter where you are, no matter where if you have your cell phone, you can access by a quick scan of a code on a package, in some cases specific to that at item level, specific to that particular item, as in comparison with the item right next to it with the same brand. You can identify that item's provenance, ingredients, allergens, anything. To being able to, Amazon is looking to their initiative is called Transparency. They're looking to roll this out to every product that's carried in their supply chain. GS1 has come out with a new standard called Digital Link, which is very powerful. And I think it also is going to change the food safety landscape.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Elizabeth. The other question we did receive is, does AIM have any resources that can help my company develop its food safety culture? Just a quick answer on that. The best thing to do is just go to aimglobal.org. We have a plethora of case studies and white papers that could probably help you out with that. We also have several industry groups. Our track and trace industry group is doing a lot of work in creating traceability, the best practices for that. And we also, AIM North America has a food safety work group as well, working on things that might help out in that regard. So I would go to aimglobal.org and contact us, and we can direct you to the right spot. Elizabeth, thanks again for your time and your insights today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, and thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day.